Hello, and welcome to Name Your Game, a video game podcast brought to you by SharcTank.com. Each episode, we have a new guest with us so we can talk about their favorite games from the past and present. I'm Dane.
And I'm Tim.
And today we have Mike McCain from Harebrained Schemes.
With an S.
Yeah, they made Shadowrun Returns, which, if you're not familiar, was kickstarted for $1.8 million.
Yeah.
So it's a big deal.
Yes. So how's it going, Mike?
It's going well. Thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah, thanks for coming.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So, we always like to start off the show with a question for our guest. A burning question that we have for you is, what is your favorite video game of all time?
Probably be Planescape Torment.
Planescape Torment.
Yeah, which was, I forget when it came out. I think it was around 2002, around there maybe.
I remember hearing about it. Yeah, it probably was around there because I think I was in high school at the time. That's around the time I was going into high school. So
there you go. Yeah, so it was one of the old Infinity Engine games in the years after like Baldur's Gate and those titles.
There you go. Okay, I see Planescape. It was. I
the
knew
tip of your tongue.
What it was. Yeah, I guess tip of my tongue, so to speak. But yeah, it's like I knew I was familiar with it, but for some reason it just I couldn't remember what it was. So yeah, so it's akin to Baldur's Gate then, or Icewind Dale.
Exactly.
Sort of
yeah.
thing.
Oh wow. Yeah. It's I guess it was 1999.
Oh wow.
Makes
Nice.
me feel old.
Okay, so that was just right before high school.
Yeah, I guess I didn't hear about it until years after.
So sorry to
It's
derail
been 15 years apparently.
Makes you feel old, doesn't it?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So Mike, what about it makes it your favorite game?
Baldur's Gate was one of the first real RPG video games that I played when I was a kid, and I was just like totally blown away. I'd never had a console growing up. I'd always been a PC gamer, and mostly that had meant stuff like Doom or along those lines. And then all of a sudden I got Baldur's Gate, and I was just like, well, holy shit, this is like these nerdy D&D games that I play, except it's on my computer. And and at the time there's things that it did that were just like really immersive. Like there's rain and lightning, and then the audio effects were really well done, and you just felt like really immersed in the world, which is
nice.
Kind of ironic looking back on it now because it's such an isometric, such a distanced game from the world, relatively speaking, right? But at the time, it was just like, yeah, I'm on this like great adventure.
Typically not the sort of game that would be heralded for its weather effects, right?
No, exactly. That was
games.
just the thing that stood out to me. Like maybe I was behind the times, but for me, that was like, wow, I can go on this cool fantasy adventure. But from a sort of story and setting standpoint, Baldur's Gate didn't stand out all that much ultimately, to me, anyways. Right? Like
sure.
They took on a lot of the typical fantasy tropes and subject matter.
Yeah,
but it was a ton of fun, right? And so fast forward a few years and Planescape comes out, and it's got to be one of the most complex and intricate RPG titles that's been made, I have to imagine.
Yeah. No, I've heard that
about it.
Tons
of dialogue. There's just a lot of like really complex choices and character development and things that are various shades of gray, and there's just like these intricate storytelling mechanisms that you don't see very often in RPGs anymore. And
who developed it?
It was Black Isle, so it was the same group that had built the Baldur's Gate series and all those.
So key people who worked on it went on to make some of BioWare's titles, for instance, or
maybe, I think. So Chris Avallone was the lead on that title. He was the designer, and I think the writer as well. And I think he came from the Fallout series, if I remember correctly. And I'm not actually too familiar with what he did after Planescape, although he's working on. So he's working on Obsidian's Project Eternity now.
Okay. There you go.
Which is also sort of a revival of the classic CRPG Infinity Engine style game. So
yeah, I could see Obsidian doing that really well.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm hoping it's good. They Obsidian just got the license for Pathfinder titles too, so that'll be interesting.
Very cool. Yeah. Have you played any of the tabletop Pathfinder at all?
Just a little bit. I've done. So I played a lot of 3.5 D&D with my friends back in the day, and so we sort of gradually moved over to Pathfinder a little bit, but we didn't really fully play Pathfinder. We just started like slowly integrating some of the rules and that stuff. But yeah, it was fun.
Back to Planescape. So, what is the setting of that game? What is the theme? I know I've heard of it, but it's been so long.
Sure, yeah. It looks kind of dated now, to be honest, but it's this it's basically this city that's kind of a nexus between all these different planes of existence. So it's a little more abstract than your typical fantasy setting. Like there's a lot of just like weird kind of offbeat characters and things that don't make a lot of sense, and
interdimensional beings.
Yeah, there's some of that, and like there's
Nice.
and it'll get a lot more like philosophical and almost literary than your typical like fantasy work. Like
Sure.
it was pretty famous for so one of the interesting things about Planescape that not a lot of written video games tend to do is that it had a strong so on Shadowrun we call it the GM voice, which is basically stage descriptions and
Narration.
yeah, exactly. So when you're reading, when you're talking to a character in Planescape, you're not just reading what they're saying to you. You're reading like
Expressions that they make,
exactly,
their body language,
exactly.
that kind of thing.
Like the old man glances down as you approach, like that sort of thing.
Right.
And it really added a lot, like because the game engine was it was 1999, right? So it's not like they could show all this elaborate acting on screen, but the way that they wrote what was happening really lets you fill in with your mind in a way that was, I think, kind of more evocative than even a lot of modern cinematic character acting in role-playing games today. Like, at least for me.
Yeah.
It's one thing, like, because some of it's bad, right? Like, if it's done well, but it's really hard in a game like, like Skyrim, right? Like, they've got so much dialogue and motion capture to try to cram in, like, that not all of it's good. And so, but on the other hand, when you just have a written description of a character doing something, it's like, you can read so much more into that.
It puts it into your mind, so to speak.
Exactly.
I mean, if you're watching a cutscene and a character in the cutscene is making facial expressions, I mean, who's to say that every player is even looking at that character's face as opposed to something else in the scene? They might not even see how that character's feeling based on their facial expression.
They're
but
doing it wrong then.
Well,
I mean, they should be trying to draw focus to
exactly.
Yes, I know, but I'm just saying that what it does when it's in text is it really. I mean,
exactly. You have to. You have no choice but to. But it also gives you some freedom because it lets you interpret. You kind of get to create the situation in your mind, just like reading a book.
Exactly. Yeah.
It gives you the liberty to imagine it the way you want to imagine it, as opposed to being forced. It just changes the way you digest it.
Yeah,
honestly,
definitely.
like it's really cool to think of it that way because for some people, playing tabletop games that are on paper is kind of hard because they can't really get into it. Their imagination only takes them so far. At least I personally have that issue sometimes. I guess it also depends on how good your DM is, of course, and how well they can describe scenarios and really get you into it. But in those sorts of games, like Infinity Engine games, it's almost like the best of both worlds because you do have your visuals and your game is built off of an engine and does the math and whatnot for you, but it's not obviously, it's not amazingly realistic. It's like, it's just enough to get the job done visually. I mean, there's more than that. I don't mean to discredit the artists and animators and whatnot.
No.
But since it's at sort of a more primitive level, but you're still getting, the great stories and combat and everything you would expect from like a tabletop game, it really works well together is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, and that's, ultimately that's what we really tried to embrace in our Shadowrun games too, is sort of, so we would call that theater of the mind, was what we were referring to at the office. So we tried to balance like, well, what are the sort of cool set pieces and immersive environments we can create on screen, or, compelling combat systems with when you're conversing with these characters, it's really a stage play, or it's a novel in some ways. And so, so we've really tried to embrace that. And I think that, especially in our follow-up Dragonfall, I was really happy with how the writing turned out. We hired a fantastic writer named Andrew McIntosh to come on, and he wrote the vast majority of the game, and we all collaborated on the story, but the words and the execution of that was largely his, and it made a huge difference. And I think it's also something where by taking that route in a time when intricate cinematics and voiceovers are the norm, we actually also get a large advantage with iteration time where we can be honing the exact language and the acting that the characters are doing up until the last minute, where with a lot of big budget RPGs, first draft or second draft dialogue goes in because they've got to send it off to the voice actors, and then it's got to go to, to the animation team or the motion capture team to line up. And and there's just no more in that, maybe that scene's really goofy now and we just realized it, or play tested and it doesn't make sense, but it might be too late to do anything about it. And I'm not saying, we still run into stuff like that from time to time too, because it's game development, but it is really flexible, and it's nice to have that flexibility. Obviously, it also limits our audience to a much smaller audience because, it's definitely a subset of gamers that likes to read as well. But
for sure. Yeah.
But we're okay with that, and as a smaller studio, and with the intent of making Shadowrun titles for this type of fan, that's something we can really take advantage of. So.
I mean, given the success of your Kickstarter, I'm sure that's all the evidence you need to know that there are a lot of people who want what you're offering, what you're offering in Shadowrun Returns. So totally. And I'm also hopeful that we've still got some more Shadowrun fans waiting out in the wings. I know you mentioned that you'd played Shadowrun before, but you hadn't heard of Shadowrun Returns yet until a few weeks ago when we were talking about doing this show. So, to be frank, that makes me hopeful that we've got some other fans out in the wings waiting to catch on too. So.
I'm sure there are more out there because, without the marketing campaign of a, AAA company, it's kind of hard to get the word out there as much for, especially for, indie games.
Yeah, and that is one area where Kickstarter really helps too, because not only is it a platform for raising funds, but it's also a microphone, and that's huge. Yeah.
Yeah. So since we're already on the subject, might as well ask you the question: what exactly did you do? What do you do at Harebrained Schemes? Tell the people about what you did and what projects you have been and are working on.
Sure. Yeah. So I joined Harebrained maybe like almost 4 years ago now, 3 or 4 years ago. It's been a little while. And I came on at the time, it was about 10 people, and they were working on a tablet game called Crimson, Steam Pirates. And I'd known Jordan from before. We'd worked together, and he'd gotten me one of my first jobs out of college, actually. So I'd known him before, and my previous startup had unfortunately just sort of reached the end of the road. And so Jordan called me up, and he needed contract art for Crimson, this game that they were working on. So I came on for that. We shipped that game, and I stuck around. We did a few more mobile titles, and then it was, I guess it was the summer of 2012? Yeah, 2012, I guess. And Double Fine Adventure had just, blown up Kickstarter. And,
sure.
They raised like $4 million. And that was insane.
$4.2 million or something.
And, Jordan was basically like, well, I'm an old game designer. I have these, sorry, I shouldn't say that to Jordan. He's a seasoned, a veteran game designer.
He's very experienced.
Exactly. And so he had created Shadowrun in the 90s, or maybe it was like 89. And he actually had the rights back for a PC title. Microsoft owns the franchise, but we have the PC RPG rights. And so that's when Jordan and his partner Mitch kind of realized, well, this is the opportunity, right? Like, there's a ton of Shadowrun fans out there. Double Fine just raised all this money. Let's try to do this thing too. And so we launched the Kickstarter for Shadowrun Returns. Sorry, this was a simple question, and I just went into the whole history of the company, but it'll be quick.
That's okay.
It's great. Keep it up.
Cool. Yeah. So we had no idea what to expect with the Kickstarter, but it was immediate success. We just blew up our initial funding ask of $400K in like less than it was like 27 hours or something crazy like that. And so it was like, all right, well, I guess there's a few Shadowrun fans out there. Let's make this game.
It's a beloved franchise. I mean, I heard a lot about it even before I knew that there were any games for it. I had heard about the tabletop version.
Yeah. People are very passionate about it.
So yeah, when I first heard about Shadowrun was actually back in the day. I played Counter-Strike a lot, and I was actually part of this conglomeration of servers. It was called the Homeland Federation. It was several servers across several games, and they were like admins and stuff. And on the forums, they played Shadowrun RPG tabletop through a forum, right? And I actually played with them briefly, but I was like 14 at the time and was dumb and didn't know things about life. So I didn't...
Like we all were at 14.
Yeah, exactly. And I ended up getting banned from those forums. That doesn't matter. What happened doesn't matter. The point is, that's how I learned about Shadowrun, and I was like, this is so cool because it was like dwarves and elves and orcs, but also like cyberpunk. And I was like, whoa, this is a new thing.
Yeah.
And then I eventually...
my reaction
I
when I
found
first heard.
the... I can't remember what system it was for. It was like it was either for Genesis or SNES.
I
or
recall
something.
there being a 16-bit era Shadowrun game. And Sega Genesis does sound right, but I suppose it could have been Super Nintendo, possibly both.
Both are true. There was an SNES game, and then there was also a Sega game. They were different titles by different developers, though. Yeah.
Yeah, that was always cool when that happened.
Yeah. And so, you know, to be honest with you, I don't think the game was that great. The Sega game that I played, it probably was a Sega because I had the Sega.
Yeah.
But
Some of our fans will hunt you down for that one, I think.
Oh no! No, I loved the world. You know what I mean, like the universe,
The setting.
Exactly. And so I don't know where I was when the Kickstarter for Shadowrun Returns was going on, because I would have jumping all over that.
I think I was familiar with it.
Did I say jumping?
Jump it all
I would
over
have
that.
jumping.
You would have been jumping.
I would have jumped all over that.
Well, it's not too late. I can send you my PayPal email address, and you can pledge as much as you like. I mean...
Yeah, I think I saw news about it on Kotaku. So I was familiar with the Kickstarter, but then after that, I forgot about it until more recently. I saw an article about is it an expansion? I guess it's technically a new campaign, right? A separate campaign.
It's
like both. DLC, right? I mean, it's...
Yeah, so Dragonfall started out as an expansion campaign that was purchasable as DLC for Shadowrun Returns. And so that's the title that I headed up as the game director. And we worked on that for about 7 months, put that out. And it was actually really well, critically very well received. And it sold all right too, but especially given the DLC distribution method. It was received very, very well. A lot of positive reviews. I think we've got like an 82, 81 on Metacritic.
Wow.
A lot of people really liked the writing, right? Like the story and the writing and the setting were kind of some of the selling points for people. And nice. But we also heard a lot of, you know, there was still some sort of clunky bits that had been inherited. Just, you know, because we built Shadowrun Returns, and then we tried to incrementally improve stuff for Dragonfall, but we're a small studio and everything takes time. And sorry, there's a cat on me, 1 second. Yeah, so there's still some more stuff that we wish we could have improved in Dragonfall. And we definitely heard a ton of comments also, kind of like, well, Dragonfall's an awesome campaign and it's completely self-contained of a narrative experience. I really wish I could just buy Dragonfall directly. And, you know, we're really proud of Shadowrun Returns too, but it's sort of, you know, that was our first title, and then we were fortunate enough that Shadowrun Returns was well received enough that we got the opportunity to go back and sort of continue to improve the product and make things better and sort of hone our craft in the storytelling sense. So we're really proud of the improvements we were able to make in Dragonfall. And so now, as a result of all that, we're actually releasing Dragonfall as a standalone game, and we're calling that Shadowrun Dragonfall, the Director's Cut.
Okay.
And so that's what we're releasing next month. Insert a shameless plug here, whatever. And that's going to be $15. It's on Steam. It's on GOG. It's on the Humble Store on September 18th. We've got new missions, new content, a bunch of new stuff. And we've actually improved a lot of the existing systems as well. Our combat system and our in-game UI have seen a major overhaul, and on top of all that, it's standalone, so you don't need to buy Shadowrun Returns. Anyone that's a fan of Shadowrun or of classic CRPGs like Planescape or like Fallout, I think it's worth your $15 to check out the Director's Cut. Obviously, my opinion's biased because I want you to buy it, but still, we're really proud of it.
I think Tim would also agree, and his opinion is less biased. I would agree, and I haven't even played it. And I don't know why I haven't played it. I really, really like science fiction settings, particularly cyberpunk
You got to
settings.
get on this.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Well, hey, at this point, honestly, wait for the director's cut. It's coming out.
Okay.
Yeah.
In about a month. So
I'm definitely gonna wait for that. I am gonna play Dragonfall though, because I've only played Returns so far, and I'm enjoying it a lot so far. The art is really good, so whoever the artist is, be sure to tell him good job. But no,
shout out to the artist.
Yeah. Well, we had a great art team.
The game looks beautiful, and it's really well written. There are, it's a $15 game, so it's not perfect. There's some mechanics that are a little clunky, like you said, that need a little fleshing out, but that's fine for $15. It's still a very great experience. And for me personally, I got a huge chuckle out of it when because it's set in the Seattle area, which is where we're from, and specifically the area you start in is a slum called the Redmond Barrens, and that's where Dane and I live, is Redmond.
Yeah,
so
that's ridiculous because
it's like the thought of Redmond really as a slum is just hilarious.
It's very ironic, and I have to wonder if whoever came up with that did that on purpose. Because just to explain to the listeners, Redmond is kind of considered, I guess, more of an upscale neighborhood, so to speak.
Yeah. A lot of people think of it as like a yuppie area, but it's not. Come on, it's great.
It's beautiful here.
Yeah,
but
I mean, not compared to like Fremont or Kirkland. It's
yeah, that's true.
As far as yuppie scale, anyway.
Sure, yeah. So we'll talk to you more about future stuff at Harebrained, but there's another question that we like to ask all of our guests. We already asked you what's your favorite game of all time, and typically the answer that we get is a game from 10 to 15 years ago. What's a game that's more recent that you've really enjoyed that's really blown you away?
Ooh.
By recent, we mean like last 3 to 5 years, maybe 7 whatever years. You interpret recent to be.
Yeah, mid 2000s and beyond. Just like something that really, really stood out to you, but is a little more modern.
Yeah, that's a great question. I feel like I need to look at my Steam library.
Yeah, that's okay. We've had another guest do that too, so it's take all the time you need.
And it can be from the perspective of an artist too. If a game had art that really stood out to you, or that you really like loved or appreciated, I mean, that works too.
Yeah, it's hard for me to just point to like one title. I mean, there's definitely a lot of games lately that I've really enjoyed.
Well, I guess in that case, what's the most recent one? What's the one that's most fresh in your memory?
Dark Souls.
Dark Souls.
Cool. Yeah. Which I've not beaten. Oh god. Yeah.
I haven't played Dark Souls. I've watched most of Dark Souls. 2 of my previous roommates would play it pretty much all day, every day, and I got to just sit on the couch and eat popcorn. And, like Michael Jackson.
I think you're doing it right.
But I absolutely understand the appeal of that series, Demon's Souls as well.
I think it's sort of a Stockholm syndrome kind of thing. Like the game is just so abusive that eventually you love it whenever it rewards you. I think it's. No, I mean, to be fair, it's also very well balanced, and it's very fair and learnable. So I think it's incredibly challenging, but once you do figure something out, it is incredibly satisfying because you can actually reliably get to that point. It's not unfair.
I think I've mentioned this on a previous episode. I think we've discussed a Dark Souls on a previous episode, and I think I said something along the lines of like the game design itself is incredibly smart because there's not much in the way of tutorials. It doesn't hold your hand, but at the same time, I mean, it teaches you through gameplay, and that's incredible because a lot of games don't really do that too much anymore. A lot of games, anytime a new feature or you're in a new area that has something you haven't seen before, it'll say, hey, you're going to see this now. Here's what you do.
Here's the tutorial pop up. Yep.
Yeah. And classic games like the Mega Man series, for instance, were really well known for similarly having gameplay that sort of teaches you through the gameplay. As you go through the level, something will pop up and kill you, but you'll know from that point forward that you might see that and you'll know how to respond to it. And I love that.
Yeah, the design from the level design in Dark Souls. I've only briefly played Dark Souls, but I have played it, and it's just so elegant. Like, because you look at it and you expect it to be like a hack and slash or like something where you're just like mauling through enemies, but it's just the complete opposite. You have to take your time. All of your actions have to be deliberate. But like you said, Mike, it's not cheap. the game's completely fair. It's just difficult. You know what I mean?
Well, there is one spot in Dark Souls where you're going across a really long, narrow bridge, and there's these two knight guys up on top of this castle, and they're shooting giant javelins at you, and it's really, really frustrating. That's the one part I would argue is there's not too much you can do to get through that without dying a lot. But I don't know. You guys might not even be familiar with that part, but I do.
Yeah, I don't think I've gotten there yet.
I do remember thinking that particular part. I was like, this is the first time I've thought that this is cheap and there's no way around it. But
have you played Dark Souls 2?
No, I haven't. I still need to finish Dark Souls 1, but I've heard largely that it's not quite as good, but I've heard mixed things about it.
Yeah, I have as well.
I've heard generally good things about it, but yeah, I've definitely heard that it was a decline from Dark Souls.
Well, I guess like one of the complaints I heard is that it doesn't feel as inspired.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess like that's sort of a thing that happens with sequels. I mean, it will feel kind of like more of the same. And they kind of tweaked certain mechanics. I heard it feels like a kind of a solid blend of the mechanics from Demon's Souls, the spiritual predecessor, and Dark Souls. But yeah, I haven't really heard too much more than that, other than it's a good game. It's just not as good as the first one.
Yeah, and it's always tough to do a sequel in general, but especially when it's a game that's, you know, heralded as a fantastic game. Like, you're almost like DOA, because how can you know, there's no way you can live up to, you know, to the hype that the previous game made.
Yeah, not always. But yeah, that's a really good choice. Dark Souls is fantastic. And visually, the world that it takes place in, there's just something so like immersive about it in terms of how lonely it is and how expansive it is. And like you kind of get the little bits of lore behind what's going on with sort of you know, the few actual other non-playable characters you get to talk to and praise the sun, and just it's a very strange setting, but there's something you can connect to it. Anyway.
Yeah, no, they did a great job with it. Some other titles recently that I've enjoyed are Kentucky Route Zero. I don't know if you guys played that.
I've heard of it. I haven't played it.
I have not heard of it.
Brett Cutler brought it up.
Did he?
Yeah.
It's a little indie adventure game. It's probably sold like 10 copies.
He did bring it up. Okay, I do remember that. That was the only other time I heard it was Brett Cutler from 17-Bit.
Yeah. Yep.
Oh, right on. I know a couple of those guys.
Yeah. I really like point-and-click adventures. I'm surprised I haven't heard of that.
Just check it out. I think the first 2 episodes are out, if I remember right.
Actually, I love point-and-click adventures, to be honest. Like, those are my PC games that I grew up with, whereas yours were CRPGs, you know.
Mine were real-time strategies.
I played a decent amount of Warcraft 2 and 3.
Oh, yeah, I played that. Yeah. I actually found my discovery of real-time strategies in general was finding, or just walking around the video game store and finding Warcraft 2 for Sega. And I played it on Sega, and I was like, this is amazing. And then I found it's on a PC, and I was like, oh my god, this makes so much more sense now.
This is how it's actually done.
Yeah. And then I discovered Command and Conquer, and the rest is history.
Yeah, I remember playing Command and Conquer. I played Command and Conquer, StarCraft, and Total Annihilation right around the same time.
Total Annihilation was kind of a weirder one.
I guess it just was sort of like the little side one that a lot of people didn't really pay attention to. Kind of has a cult following. Planetary Annihilation.
Well, mechanically, it wasn't. It was just different because you had like Warcraft, and you had Command and Conquer, and you had Age of Empires, and those were like the big ones that everyone knew.
Maybe it felt a little bit lower budget.
StarCraft as well. Well, it changed the mechanics a bit. Like there were different mechanics that just to me felt weird because I did play Total Annihilation.
What I was going to say though is that when I played those games with my cousin, we also played Baldur's Gate and Icewind Dale around the same time. So I kind of like associate real-time strategies and CRPGs together, sort of, because they were kind of big on PC right at the same time back then in the 90s.
Definitely.
Yeah, but that's really, other than that, those brief times I played those CRPGs, those are really, well, actually, no, that's a lie. Fallout 1 and 2, I did. Those are the ones I'm probably most familiar with of all of the those past games, and I absolutely love the Fallout series.
Yeah. Did you play New Vegas?
Actually, no. I did play 3, and then I witnessed a lot of New Vegas. I watched a friend play a lot of it.
You got to play New Vegas.
Why do you ask? I mean, why specifically?
Yeah.
Well, okay, so it's a lot of the same guys that made Fallout 1 and 2. Because they're over at Obsidian now. And, so I enjoyed Fallout 3, but it didn't quite capture feel of just kind of the way that you could explore the world and really and have the types of interactions with people in the world that you could in Fallout 1 and 2. So I thought from an RPG standpoint, New Vegas really sort of fully fulfilled that promise. It was buggy as all hell when it first came out too. So it's better. It's better now, thankfully.
Obsidian's kind of known for that, though, aren't they?
And especially with like these days, like computer games, you can't, or the AAA anyway, you can't play them you know what I mean? Like you can't play them on launch because it seems like all the big computer games that come out these days are they're never ready to go when they're actually launching. But that's the neat thing about computers, is it's easy to patch them. Yeah,
I guess that's the bonus.
Yeah.
Speaking of computers, I guess, versus consoles, Shadowrun Returns, is that only available on PC right now?
Shadowrun Returns is available on PC, Windows, Mac, and Linux, all of those. And then we also have an iOS and an Android version out for tablets.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, and so for the Dragonfall Director's Cut, that'll be coming out on PCs on September 18th, and then a little bit later this year, also on tablets. But we don't have any console plans.
No plans for consoles. Okay.
No, although I will say it runs just fine on my Steam box. It even sort of works with the controller. It's probably not the best way to play it, but it seems playable. So
yeah, it makes sense. Like and I mean, it makes total sense why that is just a preferable platform for it in general.
Yeah.
But I was just curious.
Yeah. No, we've never done any console development. I mean, people have, but as a studio, we haven't.
Yeah.
So I got a question for you.
Sure.
Did you always want to get in the game industry? Did you want to? You mentioned to me before we were recording that you studied computer science at the University of Washington. So was your goal always to get in the game industry, or is it just something that you happened upon because you had the right opportunity, or?
And I'm sure you liked games, growing up. I'm sure that.
Yeah, so I was always a big gamer, and that certainly makes a big difference. I think I'd always thought it would be cool to work in games. I'm not sure that I ever cultivated that as a life goal in the way that I probably should have, to be honest. I feel like I've gotten lucky a couple different times in my career, and I'm really thankful for that. But I'm not sure it's necessarily the best model to follow, but so I went to school for computer science, and I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to pursue as a career in the long run. But I had always been really into games and into art, and growing up, it was always the new Blizzard games. Like that was back when they printed game manuals, and Blizzard manuals always came with like the cool illustrations of the characters, and exactly.
I still have the original Warcraft, and like it was from the battle chest, so it had Warcraft 2, and the Warcraft 2 expansion, and I have all of the original manuals still.
Blizzard will always be known for having fantastic artwork.
So that was back. I was like, oh, well, I guess people make money like doing art for video games, apparently.
Someone's doing it.
So in school, I majored in computer science. I was interested in animation and digital art, and so I went into this capstone animation program. That's where I met Brandon's brother, June. And so we learned kind of the basics of 3D. We learned Maya, we learned 3D animation, and roughly how to put together a short film and that sort of stuff. And then I'd also kind of taught myself web design during that time, and that's what I wound up doing right out of college. I got a job in a small web startup, doing web design. And then that, I think I kind of got a little burnt out on that. But fortunately, a guy that I'd worked with was just starting a new game studio with a couple of his friends. They all used to work at Bungie together, and now they were starting up a new studio, and they needed a contract artist for some stuff, and that was me, because I'd continued just sort of like doing my own digital art on the side and like trying to get better and stuff. So had gotten to a point where I could just sort of squeak through that door, and I was in the right place at the right time. So I wound up staying with those guys for almost 2 years as we were kind of the ups and downs of startup life. Small studio of like 4 or 5 guys the entire time. And then, you know, I freelanced for a while during and after that. And then eventually Jordan called me up, like I mentioned earlier, to help out with Harebrained's first game with some contract art. And I've been here ever since.
Awesome. Yeah, I have to say, and sorry to go overboard with flattery or whatever, but when you said that you were majoring in computer science, I was pretty surprised because I did take a look at some of your artwork and I was floored. Like, your artwork is fantastic. And so to know that
thank you
didn't go into college just like living, eating, breathing, sleeping art, but you can still create the art that you're creating now is awesome, actually. I mean, you obviously have real talent for it.
Well, I promise you, if you look at any of my my computer science work, it's not nearly as pretty.
Your code?
yeah, my code is shit.
Well, that's okay.
But thanks, I appreciate that.
Yeah, of course. You're playing to your strengths there.
Yeah, exactly.
Nice. And as someone who does art for games for a living, I was actually curious, what is the #1 game series that you would absolutely love to get the opportunity to do some art for?
Or
one of the
#1 game series. That's a great question.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, I mean, is it snooty of me if I say like my own thing?
Shadowrun?
Like, no, like not Shadowrun. I mean, like,
I see.
If there's
so
anything, I'd want to try to
designs.
Yeah, exactly.
see?
Yeah, that sounds a little snotty, but
no, I think anybody in their right mind would want to be sort of a pioneer of their craft, so to speak, by creating their own thing. I mean, that's totally normal. But I mean, I guess I was curious, like if there was just like something that you're such a huge fan of, like a series like some people would say Star Wars, or I'd love to work on Zelda, or that kind of thing.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, I would work on Star Wars for sure.
I mean, those were just examples, but yeah, I mean,
well, yeah, but no, I mean, Star Wars is very close to my heart.
Okay.
That's, one of the sort of
well, then that was a good example.
Defining. I mean, yeah, like I really love Star Wars. I read all the books in high school, and I'm a horrible Star Wars nerd. So yeah.
Yeah, we're both pretty big Star Wars fans ourselves. In fact,
Tim more than I, for sure. Like I like Star Wars.
Are you familiar with the X-Wing miniatures game?
I'm not. I do really want to check it out, though. I hear a lot of good things.
Definitely got to check it out. And honestly, just the models themselves, how detailed they are, and how fantastic they look, are worth the money that you pay for them.
Right.
So Dan mentioned that I have a show on YouTube that I do with another member of SharcTank called Deckheads, and we do tabletop games. And one of the games we did was X-Wing miniatures, and we did 5 games of it. And the awesome thing about X-Wing miniatures as opposed to Warhammer or War Machine or the other big miniatures games is that you can spend $60 and have a squad that's playable in a tournament. Like you can get a good squad for less than $100, whereas like in War Machine, one tank is $50, and then that's
just a fraction of your army.
Yeah, it's 10% of your squad or whatever.
Yeah, those games can get really expensive. I guess I didn't even consider the fact that watching you and Frank playing Star Wars miniatures, I didn't consider the fact that it was a miniatures game along the line of those other games, because I'm so used to those ones having giant tables with all sorts of terrain all over the place.
Yeah, there's terrain, but it's just these little asteroids, and you set 6 asteroids down on a 3-foot by 3-foot space, and you're good to go. And again, just the models are so beautiful, and especially like the bigger ones that they've come out. The Millennium Falcon is so detailed. There's like 15 different burn marks along the body, so it looks, it doesn't look like a brand new ship right off the. Exactly, it looks like a ship that has experience on the battlefield, and it's just
that's cool.
So yeah, that's definitely something you should check out as an X-Wing miniatures game.
Yeah, no, I'll definitely check it out. I feel like you guys are setting me up to pimp our other product too here. So the game we just released last week actually is called Golem Arcana, and it's a tabletop game. But so it's actually a digital tabletop hybrid. We're calling it a digitally enhanced miniatures board game. So what it does is it takes so you play on a board with miniatures, and it's also similar to X-Wing. It's also smaller sort of unit sizes, and you can field an army without breaking the bank. But then, so what it does on top of that is we've got an app that you download to your smartphone or your tablet that actually takes care of a lot of the rules and the bookkeeping for you. And the way it does that is that there's a little stylus device that you use to input your moves as you're playing the game. So like you tap a figure and you tap where you're moving the figure as an example. And now the app knows exactly where that figure's moved. There's like a little camera in the stylus, and it reads these little micro dots that are printed on the pieces. And I don't know, it's pretty fancy. So
yeah, that's really cool.
But anyway,
I have to say,
it's
that's a little more advanced than I was expecting. That's awesome.
Yeah. So what it does, or the goal is that, well, it makes it a lot easier to pick up than other miniatures games like the ones you mentioned, where. So you can just kind of jump right in, and the app takes care of, well, how many hit points does this unit have, or what are its abilities, and how far can it move? Like the app knows all that stuff, so you don't have to refer to the table on page 170 of the rule book.
Exactly.
You just that's speaking as an ex Warhammer player.
I've got to say that's. Go ahead.
Sorry. One thing that I saw videos, I was actually going to ask you about this game, so I'm glad you brought it up.
Oh, cool.
Like, what really appealed to me is that you can you tap the thing, and then it tells you everything you need to know about that unit. Mm-hmm. How far it can move, how much damage it does, how much hit point it has, and you click on an enemy, and it tells you, okay, this is the damage it's going to do and everything. You don't have to. It's almost like a video game, but with 3D. You know what I mean?
It sounds like it has enough of the video game aspect of it to be helpful without taking away from what the tabletop players love about playing tabletop games.
Right.
Yeah,
which
that
is
is
cool.
exactly the goal. Yeah.
And I was gonna say I've definitely been to the game store more than once and witnessed Warhammer or other tabletop game players having to stop the game to take out the measuring tape and then really meticulously see exactly at what angle and how far they can move the units, and it just seems like a kind of a hassle.
I've seen guys that are really into it, and they're arguing that's 8.5. No, that's 8 5/16 inches, or 5/8. No, it's 8.5. No, it's 8 5/8. You're out of range, and it's just like, are you okay? There's a point where that's a little excessive.
Yeah. So it sounds like this cool little stylus does that work for you.
Yeah, that's the idea. And there's a lot of other nice things that come with that are going to happen down the road. Like you can just imagine, because the app's keeping track of everything, there's a lot of really cool opportunities for organized play and tournament play where everything, it's all digital, it's all tracked. Every game that you play at a tournament's automatically displayed on the leaderboard. You don't even have to go tell someone who won. We already know.
Yeah, that's awesome.
We're not spying on you, but if you went to a tournament, if you go to a tournament, you're opting in and you're saying, yeah, I'm participating. And that's not in the game right now, I don't believe, but that's on the roadmap. There's just all sorts of potential that this offers. Or another thing that we can do is we can dynamically, we can update, we can add new scenarios through the app, or we can update existing scenarios. We can also tweak game balance if we need to, and that's one thing that's always really difficult with traditional tabletop or board games. Like, like if there's a exploit in StarCraft 2, then Blizzard can push a fix to nerf the Hydralisk a little bit or whatever. And so we can do the same thing with our board game because of the app.
That's awesome. Yeah, that loops into a conversation we've had a couple times on this show, which is the difference between a digital card game like Hearthstone and a physical card game like Magic the Gathering.
Yeah.
It's kind of the same thing. When it comes to Magic, it just gets ridiculous because they're constantly banning their own cards and then releasing new ones. Whereas with a game like Hearthstone, they can just patch their cards to be more balanced. And
exactly.
It's really cool how that works. And I guess I have to assume you probably had a strong hand in designing a lot of the units for this game? Like artistically?
No, actually, so I've been heads down on the Shadowrun team. That's our other art director, Chris Rogers. He's done an incredible job with Golem, just like...
So different teams on the...
Exactly, yeah. Okay. So we're kind of a two-team studio right now. But our team does sort of move back and forth a little bit. Mm-hmm. Okay. And that's something that works out really well, actually. So... you know, Chris is heading up this project, I'm heading up this other project, and as our projects have different kind of art needs, where the studio can be kind of flexible to that. So
very cool.
So has Golem Arcana, has that been released or is it upcoming? I can't remember.
No, it came out last week actually at Gen Con.
Yeah, of course, Gen Con. That's where everything gets released.
Yeah, well, yeah, pretty much.
So what's the price point for Golem Arcana?
Pretty sure, gosh, I should know this. Sorry, I'm pretty sure the base set is $80 right now.
Okay, that's reasonable for what you get with it. You know,
yeah, for because robot stylus. Definitely. Yeah,
and the miniatures that come in are really cool looking. Like,
yeah, they turned out great. So you get the stylus, you get the app, you get the 6 figures, you get the game board tiles, and all the little accessories.
Wow.
So yeah, it's really competitive, especially for board games these days.
Honestly, where, well, a game like this really does make your company kind of true to its name, because Harebrained Scheme, like, it's so innovative.
Oh yeah, it's definitely a scheme. Yeah, a good scheme.
A good scheme, exactly.
Yeah. So we're reaching the end of the podcast here. We're wrapping up. We always end our podcast with what we do is we ask you a question that our previous guest came up with, and then we task you with coming up with a question for our next guest. Yeah. So our previous guest.
That wasn't a very good question.
No. Well, that was our guest's name. It was fuck. Brandon, what was the question?
Well, the guest, the guest was what, George? From
Yeah. So the previous guest was George Weedman. You'll know him from his YouTube channel, Super Bunny Hop. He's a games journalist, kind of.
Okay.
No, he does YouTube videos. He's really smart and puts out really great content. He also does a podcast and other stuff. So his question was, if I remember correctly, what smell is your favorite game associated with? Yeah. Was that what it was?
It was, is there a smell that you associate with one of your favorite games? Something along those lines. Because, I mean, in the sense that the smells are what evoke memory the strongest of all the senses. Sorry if there's sort of like a static behind me.
Oh, no worries. Smell, huh? That's tough. That's interesting, and I have heard that said before about smell. Yeah. I have always had a complete shit sense of smell. So I'm actually not sure I have any memories associated to smell, which might be atypical, but not just of games, but nothing comes to mind anyways.
Yeah, well,
maybe I'd have to smell it to know it, right?
That actually typically is how it goes. Like I will smell something like a food that I haven't had since I lived in like a place where, it's easy to get that food or whatever. And then I'll start thinking of things that I used to do while eating it, that kind of thing.
I don't really associate smells with memories enough, but I really do music.
Yeah, I was going to say, for me, it's audio is where my memory comes in. Like if I hear a song that is part of an album that I listened to on repeat while playing a specific game that just came out at the time, that game is going to be associated with that album. And so that's what I thought of when he asked that question. So, I mean, honestly, we can change it and just associate it to, if there's any sort of sense, if there's a song you can think of or music that you can think of that reminds you of a game that you really cherish the memory of.
Back when I was, I had a World of Warcraft period.
Mm-hmm. Oh, we all have.
I'm clean now. I have
same here.
Not touched
I'm on
it in
WildStar
a
now.
while.
I'm on WildStar now. It's way cleaner. It's way better for you. That's what I've heard.
Yeah.
It doesn't have the same. Okay. Anyway,
that's just because they don't know yet. They don't know what the side effects
they
are.
haven't researched it yet. They don't know the effects on your body.
Exactly. No. So back when I was really into WoW, I was in college, and gosh, I don't know. I guess, I don't know if there's a particular sound. I don't know where I was going with that. Oh, Mountain Dew. I'd associate Mountain Dew and White Castle burgers with
perfect taste. That's a sense.
Wow. Yeah. So there you go.
We did it, guys. We got it.
We've embarrassed you on the internet. Mountain Dew and White Castle burgers.
the internet embarrassment thing.
No, that sounds
before,
amazing.
don't worry.
Actually,
So you're not originally from Seattle, then? I'm guessing.
No, Eastern Washington.
Okay.
No, and the White Castle was the kind that you buy at the the
frozen.
dorm.
You can
That's
make
the
them-
kind that you buy at the dorm convenience store and
You can make
reheat
them
in
pretty
your shitty
close.
microwave.
If you steam them, you can put them in the microwave and put a little bit of water under them, and they'll get steamed.
I think that speaks
Yeah, but when
to
you're
the,
playing WoW, you do not put that kind of effort into it.
I think that speaks to the poor quality of White Castle itself, as opposed to the high quality of the microwavable version.
Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah, I actually had legit White Castle for the first time when I was in Minnesota a few weeks ago,
Oh wow.
and it was
It's fine.
It was
I like
alright.
the little onions.
It was okay.
That's my favorite part.
fine.
Yeah,
Anyway,
the
Mike,
onions
so it's your
are
turn to
good.
come up with a question for our next guest.
And it can be anything.
Come
It doesn't
up
even
with
have to be game related.
Yeah, in fact,
Any question.
any question at all.
I'm going to go with what is the average airspeed velocity of an unladen swallow?
I kind of want to suggest that we go with
question.
a question that would be...
Well, the answer
A
would be a
real
question in that
question?
case.
The answer would be a question. so
Not that
you
that
would,
wasn't a real question, but it may be something that is a little more relatable to just a general audience.
That's fair.
But that's a good question.
Yeah, you know, we've had questions about what was the favorite time have you had in your life, or what, you know, what's a art or a filmmaker that never lets you down, you know, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, every single movie they
But
made
then there's
was
also, you know, if you could take two puzzle platformer game mechanics and put them together for a game, what would they be? Or if you could take a boss out of one game and put it in a different game, what boss would that be and what game would you put it in? You know, that kind of thing.
Star Wars or Indiana Jones? Which one and which particular movie and why?
Perfect. That's
That's
awesome.
a good question.
Yeah. What would you pick?
Yeah, that's...
You didn't say I had to answer it.
No, too late now. You already signed the papers.
Okay, well, I feel like I'm betraying my entire childhood, but Raiders of
That's
the
what we're
Lost
here for.
Ark would be my choice.
Raiders,
Although
okay.
Star Wars as a series and as a sort of cinematic influence would be higher for me, but as
Sure.
a particular movie, I think that Raiders of the Lost Ark is
Yeah.
almost the perfect film, and so I'd have to choose it.
It's definitely my favorite Indiana Jones film, for sure.
I love Raiders. In fact, it was in theaters for maybe just one day, like a few months ago, and my girlfriend had never seen it before, and it was so cool taking her to see her first time seeing it was in the theater. You know what
Nice.
I mean? This
Oh,
year,
yeah.
and that was really cool because I love that movie.
Yeah.
Awesome.
You
Well,
know, Harrison Ford a few months ago did an AMA on Reddit, and he told a really interesting anecdote, a really interesting anecdote about Raiders. You know that iconic scene where that big dude comes out with the sword and he's swinging it, you know, and then he just pulls out the gun and he kind of like shrugs and just goes bam, and shoots him.
Yeah.
Originally,
that was improvised, right?
yeah, originally kind of. Originally that scene was going to be the ultimate duel between whip and sword, but Harrison Ford had dysentery, so he couldn't do a big action scene. So they said because he couldn't film for more than like 10 minutes at a time every couple hours, you know what I mean? So they just changed it to a really short scene because Harrison Ford's illness. And it's so funny because I feel like the way it is now is so much better than if it was a big action scene.
yeah, it really,
totally, yeah.
it adds to his character quite a bit.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I love it the way it is now, and it's interesting the way things like that can come about.
Yeah.
That's a good example of how creative constraints and unanticipated things can foster better creativity than endless opportunities, and I think that's another reason why, you know, even as CG and visual effects technology has gotten so much better, and it's really put every option on the table for filmmakers. Like that's actually not always a good thing when it comes to storytelling, and
I miss
and
those
the quality
dinosaurs
of
from
what they
Jurassic
can
Park.
do.
I'll tell you that much.
Yeah, it's like those constraints actually made them do better work in a lot of ways.
Yeah, they had to work as hard as they could to make something seem realistic with what they had, and really blossomed because of it, you know?
Yeah, for sure.
Strength from hardship, et cetera, and so forth.
Yep.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, anyway, I think that pretty much wraps things up. Thanks again for coming on, Mike. We really enjoyed it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to playing Dragonfall, and I'll see you at PAX. I'll check out Golem Arcana because that really appeals to me. We're sitting next to my board game collection that's, you know, I don't know, 75 to maybe 100 games. I don't know. So it's definitely right up my alley.
Nice.
All right, so this was Dane.
And Tim.
And thank you so much for listening to Name Your Game. We do work on several other projects here at SharcTank.com. That's Shark with a C. We're a nonprofit, volunteer-driven gaming and geek culture site based in Seattle. We do local convention coverage, especially with PAX 2014 coming up here. We do Let's Plays, tabletop strategy, and game reviews, among plenty of other things. So please like and subscribe if you do want to support us in our work. And you can definitely leave feedback through comments on YouTube, on our website, SharcTank.com, or you can even email us pertaining to this show at nyg@sharktank.com. Once again, thank you so much, Mike, for coming on.
Yeah, we really appreciate it. Thanks for listening, everybody. Bye.
Take it easy.